high school, most of the time it was a good thing to be featured in the school newspaper. But I was sitting in class one afternoon my senior year when I realized that there are times that it clearly is not. I had joined a student club called Peer Advisory, where members organized activities and served as advisors for middle school students. It was a good group overall, but I quickly realized that some of the members, who also happened to be some of the most popular kids in school, were drinking and partying on weekends. They were not, in my eyes, living up to the club's mission of being role models. So I decided that the most appropriate thing for me to do next would be to bring this up for discussion at our next club meeting, where I proposed that every member of the club sign a pledge agreeing not to drink. As you might imagine, berating your fellow teenagers about their behavior and how they weren't being very good role models didn't go over so well. So then there I am a few days later sitting in class as the school newspaper is delivered. I flip it open, and I see my name in the news brief section. But it isn't celebrating something wonderful I had done. It was one line, and all it said was, "Hey, Jess Lawrence, you suck." It turned out that a couple of the editors of the paper were also members of the club, and they were upset with me for my peer advisory righteousness and had slipped that one little line in after the principal had signed off on the paper. And in a final act of utter high school mortification that day, the principal made the editor-in-chief of the paper apologize to me publicly over the school's address system. But beyond that momentary embarrassment, it turned out that I didn't care what the popular kids thought. I didn't care what social rules I was breaking or what they said about me in the paper. The only thing I really cared about was doing what I thought was right. Now, if it's not already clear, I'm a person who, in general, likes rules. I'm careful. I like order. I'm the person who showed up at college and wandered the halls of my dorm, picking up and throwing away abandoned beer cans, wondering where all of the adults were. I'm the person who doesn't cut in line, who stays to the right on the sidewalk, and who always carries Band-Aids. But even for me, not all rules are created equal. Teenage social rules could be trumped by the rule of doing the right thing. For those of us who are overcome by these visions of what's wrong and how we think it might be fixed, we often can't stand that gap between what is and what could be, a space that educator Parker Palmer calls the tragic gap. Our approach to leadership is all about action. We plow ahead, trying to close that uncomfortable gap as fast as possible. My version of rebellion in high school wasn't about skipping class or sneaking behind the school to smoke. It was urgently telling the popular kids to either quit smoking or stop calling themselves role models. But my urgency alone wasn't enough to convincingly make my case. And in my haste to close that uncomfortable gap, I had chosen efficiency over effectiveness, and I failed. From that lesson in high school and many other lessons early in my career, I began to see how ineffective speed often is as a strategy. And I started to notice the negative side effects of being too focused on getting to the finish line too quickly. But as I look around the world today, it feels like these lessons that I learned are getting a bit lost. I see us and the companies that we work for and run and our culture in general falling under the spell of constant urgency. And it's not just urgency to right what is wrong. It's an urgency driven by deep fear, a sense of scarcity and competition, and a need to win in order to survive. We have urgency to get good grades and be at the top of our class. We have urgency to build our businesses, launch before the competition does, and lead the market. We're told to lean in and step up. We have emails constantly pinging us, reminding us that we're not fast enough. We have an onslaught of productivity tips implying that we don't get enough done. And being left in this place of feeling like none of it is enough, we push harder, we accelerate our pace, we become more competitive with others, and we start trying to find every way that we can to survive and come out on top. To do that, we turn to data and quantifying all of the aspects of our life. We want to know how we can be less human and more like machines. How can we be more predictable, more productive, more efficient? We read articles like 8 things successful people do before 8 a.m. and 10 things you can get done when you have a 15-minute break. At our companies, we measure when employees are online and when they're off. We track how long it takes them to get projects done, how many sales reports they've completed, how many sales calls they've made. We have screen monitoring software to know exactly what they're looking at any given time. We get obsessed with ROI and KPIs. In this system of business, data threatens to optimize the humanity right out of our work. In this system, the messiness of being human has no place at the office. Running a business is about processes and rules. It's about efficiency and effectiveness, as if the employees who work there are made out of steel and oil instead of flesh and blood. We push aside empathy and deep connection in well-being in favor of results. And because we get so focused on results, companies often end up using quantitative measures to justify behavior that is qualitatively destructive. It's okay to be a jerk as long as your sales are up. It's okay to be unethical as long as you're beating the competition. It's okay if employees are depressed and overworked, as long as they're meeting their benchmarks. But as I learned when I was in high school, it is essential for us to be able to pause and slow down. Before I started working in the tech industry, I thought this mindset of competition and scarcity was the old way, the outdated way, the way of big corporations and industrial age entrepreneurs. But that way is a way that I keep seeing. And maybe I was a bit naive or just optimistic, but when I came into the tech industry, I expected to find a huge group of incredibly enlightened people who were not only building innovative products, but who were building truly innovative workplaces. I thought they would be the ones challenging the way that work had always been done and writing new rules of business. Because the way that we work right now is not working very well. A Gallup study reports that only 13% of employees worldwide are engaged with their work. A Harvard Medical School study showed that 96% of leaders say that they report feeling burned out. The United States is the last developed country that has no mandated paid paternity leave. And 45 million Americans still live below the poverty line. This system of work and business that we have is not working. And yet, when I look at the tech industry and look at entrepreneurs and look at all of these people who are building companies from scratch, the vast majority of them are not advocating for or embracing the type of change that I think we need. They are still working from that place of scarcity and competition and constant action. But that lesson that I learned about slowing down applies to them too. Because slowing down is essential, no matter what you're doing, for good leadership and to lead a good life. And that's getting more and more difficult. Technology makes it more challenging for us. And our culture shift in general means that we've gotten much more comfortable with doing than we are with being. We're in constant performance mode, trying to prove how smart we are, trying to do interesting things, trying to prove our value. And because we're constantly performing, we have very little time to feel like we are present. And that means that we are missing a lot. Now, picture for a minute a situation that I think many of you have probably found yourselves in. Sitting on a couch in front of the television, a box of chocolates or other candies by your side, and you're so engrossed in whatever show you're watching that even though you keep reaching over and picking up chocolates and putting them in your mouth, you barely notice their taste. You don't even notice how they smell. And you finally reach over to grab another chocolate and realize that there are no chocolates left. You've eaten through a whole box without even realizing it. Now shift away from that for a second. Think about turning off the television and focusing on nothing but the chocolate. If you eat it slowly, you notice its texture, its smell, its taste. You end up enjoying it more. When we slow down, we're able to extract more value and meaning out of life. We're able to connect more deeply with ourselves and with others so that we can develop a better sense of what gives us that feeling of well-being that we're all working so hard to find. Now, embracing the concept of presence isn't about completely switching from fast to slow. It's not about trying to become the tortoise instead of the hare. To me, it's really about figuring out how to be the tortoise and the hare and switch intentionally between the two. Another core component of shifting our approach to business and life, to me, is finding new heroes of business, broadening the spectrum of what we consider to be success. I like to find heroes who are driven to change the world, even in small ways, much more so than they are driven by the false urgency of always trying to win. My heroes of business are heroes of the human mind and spirit. They are heroes of human potential. And they may be people that you've never heard of, but they're important because they connect to what I value. They are people like Martin Seligman and Carol Dweck, Parker Palmer, Susan Cain, and Tina Roth-Eisenberg. And you can find your own heroes. And when you do, use their courage to be different as a boost to your own courage to be different. My challenge to all of you, and especially to the tech startup community and anyone who's building a company, is to take the fact that we are creating this whole new generation of companies and use it as a platform to challenge the way that work has been done. Challenge this push for constant urgency, challenge the systems and structures of work that no longer serve us well, challenge the notion that a quantified life is a better life, and challenge any system of business that doesn't have human well-being at its core. Use the fact that you are building something new as a platform for a new kind of disruption, a disruption that honors slow as much as it honors fast, a disruption that honors being kind as much as it honors being driven. And while you are in the middle of all of this performance and action, challenge yourself to find moments of presence. If I could go back and revisit my 17-year-old self, I would stand next to her and give her hand a squeeze. I would tell her to slow down, just a little. I would tell her to have courage and patience to stay in that uncomfortable gap between what is and what could be. And I would tell her not to lose her boldness, because having something you are willing to take action on is essential, even if you eventually realize that sometimes the best thing to do is pause and listen. Thank you.